So my name is Steve Sanderson. I'm a senior account executive with Edgewater Full Scope. Today's webinar topic is automated validation testing. It's the fourth in a four-part series that we've been running around the topic of validation. I'll introduce our featured speaker today, Valarie King-Bailey, in just a minute. But just up front, just a little bit about Edgewater Full Scope. We are a Microsoft Dynamics 365 partner, both for D365 ERP as well as CRM. We focus 100% on manufacturing, and I'll talk about some sub-verticals in a second. We've got over 200 implementations of D365 ERP, well over 1,000 implementations of CRM, which you see here as customer engagement. We have a very complete business intelligence practice as well. Inner Circle is Microsoft's nomenclature for the top 1% of partners globally. So we've been in the Inner Circle 11 times, including the most recent year, Microsoft's fiscal 2017 and 2018. We are in 5 Microsoft industry partner programs. The first of which is obviously life sciences, which includes medical device, pharma, biotech, nutraceuticals, all of the validated industries, as well as food, consumer packaged goods, chemical, and building and industrial products. In order to be in these programs, there's a heavy commitment. You have to have a long track record. You've got to have successful track record in the industry. There's probably only just a few in each of the industry partner programs, just a few partners that qualify for that. We're strong implementers. Our customers do well. We've had 7 customers win excellence awards. Full Scope, both with regards to ERP and CRM, has won over 20 Microsoft Partner of the Year awards, including, for example, the Global Dynamics Manufacturing Partner of the Year, 3 of the 4 years that it was awarded. Before I get into the introduction of Valarie, I just want to again say that this webinar will be recorded, as were the first 3. They are available on the website. At the end of the presentation today, we'll pop up the link to that website, so you'll be able to see it. This one will be posted probably in a couple days or a week or so. And again, if you got questions, feel free to post them in chat, and if we don't get to them today, we will respond back to you. So just a little bit about Valarie King-Bailey. Valarie is the CEO of Onshore Technology Group. Onshore is an independent Chicago-based consultancy founded in 2004. They specialize in independent validation and verification, both services as well as solutions. Valarie has over 30 years of experience in validation. She's worked for leading global companies such as Cumis Limited, out of Ireland, EMC Documentum, Abbott Labs, US Steel. At Cumis, she served as the Chief Marketing Officer. There she was responsible for all global tactical and strategic marketing initiatives, in addition to the development of their validation toolkit. She made her impact at Abbott Laboratories in Chicago, where she was Director of Document Management and Quality Systems, leading a $16 million division-wide validation initiative. Valarie received Abbott's Chairman's Award, which is the highest honor bestowed by Abbott on its employees by the CEO and board of directors. She actually won that award 2 consecutive years. In 2008, Valarie received the Distinguished Alumni Award for the University of Wisconsin College of Engineering. In 2010, she received a Lifetime Achievement Award from UW College of Engineering. She's one of the Wisconsin College of Engineering's notable alumni. In 2015, Valarie won the IVT Global Speaker of the Year Award. She also received a nomination for Ernst & Young's Entrepreneur of the Year Award in 2006. Valarie's got an MBA in Information Systems from the Keller Graduate School of Management. She's got a BS in Civil and Environmental Engineering from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. She's a member of the Institute of Validation Technology, International Society of Pharmaceutical Engineers, American Society of Civil Engineers, Society of Women's Engineers, National Girls Collaborative Project for STEM Education, Regulatory Affairs Professional Society, and a University of Wisconsin College of Civil Engineering Advisory Board member. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Valarie.
Thank you so much, Steve, and good afternoon to everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I have a really exciting topic to discuss today, and one of the things that has been happening in my practice is many companies are looking at automation of the validation process. It's kind of, in the IT world, it's kind of the last bastion of automation that's happening. Validation, as you know, has been pretty manual. So I have a pretty packed agenda today that I'd like to talk to you about. First, I'd like to, just kind of set the stage and talk about the changing state of validation. There are many things that are changing the way people validate systems today. The technology, the way systems are built and deployed, and then regulatory requirements. We're going to get a little bit into that. And then I'd like to talk to you about automated testing by the numbers. A lot of people say, well, I've got technology to deal with various aspects of it. How much automation do I need? I'm going to talk to you about automation and a more cohesive process to automation, because this is really important for you to understand the payback, if you will, for automation. And then I'm going to talk to you about an automated validation testing solution. Some of you out there are actually deploying Dynamics 365, and I'm going to talk about an innovative way to actually automate the process of validation of Dynamics 365 to save you both time and money. And then I want to talk about the 7 habits of highly effective automated testing, and then I'll conclude with my final thoughts on the whole process. So let's begin. So one of the things that we want to talk about is kind of how validation is changing. If you have been participating in this executive series, you'll know that I talked in the first series about how validation is changing. And, for the last 30 years or so, validation has remained, for the most part, pretty stagnant. But there have been some technology shifts that are changing the way we look at validation. So let's talk about that. First, before I begin, I talked a little bit about this in the first webinar series, but I want to go back to this again. If you don't know, there is a standard for independent validation and verification. So a lot of times when validation is referred to, it's referred to simply as validation. I need to validate my system and so forth. But the full name of validation is independent validation and verification. And the standard is IEEE 1012. If you haven't seen the 1012 standard, please shoot me an email and I'll send it to you. It is the standard for software validation. And here's what it says in a nutshell about independence. Validation should have 3 types of independence in order to ensure compliance with the standard. It should be technically independent, managerially independent, and financially independent. When we say technical independence, validation should be conducted by a team that is not involved in the development of the software. So if you have a company, say it's Microsoft or Oracle or whoever, the company that is responsible for the development should not be involved in the validation. Validation should be conducted independently. Why? The main reason why is for segregation of duties and to ensure objectivity in the validation process. That's really the spirit of where this standard sits. Then managerial independence. If you have the person who's managing validation, the same person who's managing development, you have somewhat of a conflict of interest. The development community is not going to say that their baby is ugly. So you need someone who is managing the IV&V process to be separate from the organization that's vested in implementing the system. And then financial independence. People can be persuaded financially to give erroneous results. So let's say, for example, if the validation team was beholden to the team that is responsible for system implementation, that causes somewhat of a conflict of interest. So technical, managerial, and financial independence is super important. Now, as we talk about automated validation systems, there's a term that I want you to get used to, and that is the whole paperless or green validation. I did a white paper about 3 years ago on green validation, and it's really a unified electronic process that leverages advanced technology to fulfill the technical, business, and compliance requirements for software validation, eliminating and minimizing the use of manual paper-based processes. So green validation is really essential to driving automated testing. And keep that definition in mind as we go through this. Now, what's the problem with manual processes? You may say, I've been doing validation for X number of years and we've always done it manually, and we've never had a problem with the FDA or the EMEA or the Canadian Medicines Authority. We've never had any issues with them. So what's the problem? The problem is this. When you deal with manual processes, you are dealing with many disjointed applications as you prepare your validation documentation. So what are we doing when we're validating? We're really preparing documentation suitable for regulatory review. That's really the reason why we're doing this. But in validating, you have about maybe 12 to 20 tools that you're dealing with. You have a desktop authoring tool, whether it be Word or Excel. Sometimes people use PowerPoint even. You have reporting tools. You have automated testing tools of all varieties. There are performance qualification tools. There are functional tools. There are even unit testing tools that are separate. You have non-conformance systems, you have CAPA systems, you have all manner of quality management tools, you have content management or document management tools that you're dealing with, workflow management tools, requirements management tools, bug and defect tracking tools, business intelligence tools that give you status, electronic signature tools that go along with your document management systems, source code management tools, version control tools, release management tools. You get the idea, and even reporting tools. So when you're dealing with this whole myriad of tools, as you're trying to prepare validation documentation, herein lies the problem. These tools are disjointed. They often don't work together really well. And so what's that mean for you at the end of the day? Time and money. This is why validation has the reputation of being costly and time consuming. Over the last 30 years that I've been validating systems, the number one complaint about validation is that it takes a long time to actually do. And one of the reasons why it takes a while is companies are trying to blend all of these tools together to make it work in some cohesive fashion. So what's this mean? Wouldn't it be nice if you had a tool that brought all of this together and allowed you to manage your validation projects in a more cohesive manner? That's what we're going to talk about today. So here's my so-called circle of pain. And if you've been around validation as long as there are some pain that's involved here. Manual test script generation, and I use this as the number one pain. If you look at any validation project, the number one time consumer is the actual development and execution of test scripts. That's one of the most time-consuming and costly and could be potentially error-prone areas of validation. The next thing, and this is my least favorite aspect of validation, is requirements traceability. It's mandatory, it states in the regulation, and all guidance, whether it be GAMP5 guidance or whether it be guidance from, Canadian, European, or other global regulatory authorities, they strongly recommend that you trace requirements to test scripts and test scripts to requirements to ensure that your requirements coverage is there. But the problem with manual traceability is that it's error prone. If you have, take for example, Dynamics 365. Dynamics 365 is a very robust ERP system, but the problem is that it has a lot of requirements associated with it. So requirements traceability is not a big deal if you have 10 requirements. It's no big deal to trace 10 requirements to 10 test scripts. But if you have hundreds of requirements that you have to trace to hundreds of test scripts, therein lies the problem. The next element in my circle of pain is publishing your pre and post executed test scripts. Now, in many cases, you probably have SOPs within your organization that define a predefined format for validation testing. And with your predefined format, you have to publish your test scripts in that format. Well, the problem is many of the solutions that are out there, those point solutions on the previous slide, many of them don't allow you to export in the format that you need. So there's a lot of manipulation of documents that require a lot of pain to get to your end result. And then capturing validation test scripts. For years, I've used Windows Screen Capture or applications like TechSmith's Snagit, which many of you may be used to. And basically what you're doing is you're cutting and pasting screenshots into a Word document and manipulating the screenshots so that they fit inside of your expected results box and then, ultimately your actual results box. This is an area where automation could really save time and money. And then manual document approval. This is one of the big areas where there is tremendous time saving. I did a project at my previous company, Abbott Laboratories, and we had a document cycle time that was taking about 120 days. When we automated and went to electronic signature, that went down to 12 days, saving enormous time and money. And then regression testing. You all know that when you first validate a system and you declare that system validated, that's just the beginning. Validation is a repetitive process that happens over the life of the system. So regression testing tends to be another pain point because even though you've written the test scripts again, you have to rewrite them for regression testing. Wouldn't it be nice if you had a reusable test script library and you could just simply pull the test scripts from that reusable test script library and retest over again for regression testing? That's the better way to do it. We're going to talk about that. And then managing your requirements over time. When you're dealing with large ERP systems like Dynamics 365, managing your requirements and finding out who changed what requirement, when, and why tends to be somewhat of a problem. So you want to make sure that as you manage your requirements, you're managing them over time. And then test execution and incident management. When we execute a test script, sometimes it doesn't go well. And sometimes the test script fails and we have to generate an incident report. The number one cause of 483s, or these are, audit issues with the FDA, is the fact that most test engineers lose the incident reports that are associated with their test script. Would it be nice if when I executed a test script, I can automatically raise an incident report and that incident report remained linked to my test script? That's what we're going to talk about. So when we look at the circle of pain, these are some of the key pain points that are screaming they need to be automated, and we're going to talk about how to automate those. Most IV&V efforts that I see are superficial. A lot of times people just simply scratch the surface when they're validating. So what are we doing when we validate a system? When I validate a system, I'm really trying to break it. I'm looking for errors. I'm looking for issues. Why? Because if I don't find the issues, my user communities will find the issues. I don't want the user community debugging the software. So validation is meant to catch issues. But a lot of times, because of the pain that I just highlighted in the previous slide, people kind of do the minimum amount effort because it takes a lot just to get through all of those pain points. So what are we not addressing? Well, we're not addressing things like cybersecurity. This is the biggest threat to validated systems. And I talked in my last webinar briefing about cybersecurity qualification. If you haven't seen that one, check that one out. We want to talk about the impact of changes. How do changes affect the system? According to the FDA, a small change can result in a significant issue within the system. So sometimes I hear technical people saying, oh, all I want to do is like make a quick change, or all I want to do is apply a real quick patch. Quick, implies that this is a simple thing. That simple thing could ripple through your system and cause a lot of issues. And then robust negative testing. This is a lot of what we focus on at Onshore Technology Group. We don't only do the positive case. In other words, that I can create a production order. We look at who shouldn't be able to create a production order, and what if I create a production order and I have a wrong bill of materials? Is the system going to complain? Or if I change the bill of material or change an active ingredient in pharmaceuticals, what happens then? What happens if I enter too much product? Am I able to sell 1 million units of my product to a particular customer? Am I able to sell something that has lead in it in the state of California, for example, where it's prohibited? These are the things that we're looking at. So when you're looking at validation testing, you need to go deeper. And the issues are deeper down the center of the iceberg, so to speak. So why do you want to automate to begin with? And as I said before, a number of people, when I start talking about this, they go, automate, schmautomate. Why do we want to do this? Well, a lot of times, if you're like most companies, you're being asked to do more with less. So a lot of companies, and this happened to me when I was working at Abbott Laboratories, I had 64 different systems that I was responsible for. So my management was not sympathetic when it came to me rapidly executing and developing my test scripts. They wanted me to get a move on because they had these systems that were essential to the business that they wanted me to validate. You want to automate traceability. You should not be tracing scripts automatically. You should be looking at your requirements coverage, and that should be automated to give you your traceability as a normal byproduct of validation. You also want to ease the effort that it takes to maintain the validated state. As I mentioned before, once you validate a system, you're not done. That system has to be maintained over the life of the validated system. So you want to maintain the validated state. This requires a bit of automation to effectively do this. And then automate your document validation and document approval. If there's one thing that ties up a validation project, it's the lack of automation of document approval. If you give people an easy way to approve documents, they're more apt to approve those documents. If you make the approval process cumbersome and you send someone a 40-page document and ask them to read it really quickly and approve it, you may not get a response. So the idea is to accelerate validation, productivity, and compliance. That's why we want to automate. Now, there's a business case for doing automation too of validated processes. Manual validation processes really can't keep pace with the business pace that you and I are both experiencing. Our management is deploying systems so that they can bring new products to market faster. And that means the implementation process has to be faster and the validation process has to be accelerated. You're getting increasing global compliance requirements. So whether you're in the United States, Canada, Europe, Asia, global requirements from a regulatory perspective are not decreasing, they're increasing. And then there's changing deployment models. This is one of the biggest things when we look at the changing face of technology. We're looking at cloud computing systems, on-premise computing systems, and then hybrid systems, which are a combination of cloud and on-premise. And then mobility and data integrity. Mobility has basically kind of turned validation practices on its head. Because with mobility, for example, in the Dynamics 365 world, Microsoft has created an app store. I can actually download mobile applications that interact with my ERP systems from the App Store. But what does this do to things like data integrity? The FDA has recently issued guidance on data integrity. So when we look at these things and how the FDA is not only its integrity, but authenticity, these things make the business case for why we want to automate. So let's look at validation by the numbers, or automated testing by the numbers. And I dug up some interesting statistics that I'd like for you to see. So when we talk about automated testing, just to establish some common ground, automated testing decreases the amount of time that it takes to validate, while manual testing increases the amount of time. So I am actually comparing automated testing versus manual when we kind of look at the numbers. So when we look at a recent study by IVC that was conducted, they concluded, among interviewing several people, that there's some compelling financial benefits to automation. They said, or they found in their research, 43% fewer defects can be discovered. It should be clear that it costs 4 times as much to fix a defect when you're in production than it does earlier on in the validation process. They also found 48% of quality time savings. Your quality assurance organization will see this. Now, we're seeing this across multiple projects because quality assurance not only has to review your validation project individually, but they look at this across multiple projects. If they're able to review documents online and they don't have to print the documents out and go through the hassle of the manual process, they say it's a 48% time saving, 38% shorter testing cycles. We're seeing this in our practice. Right now, we use exclusively automated testing at Onshore Technology Group. For COTS applications, this really, really drives efficiency. So whereas before, it was a little more costly to do a Dynamics 365 or a Microsoft Dynamics AX project just because of the manual processes involved, we've shaved off about 38 to 40% of the project. And that leads directly into shorter project timelines and then staff reduction. IDC said in their research that 54% 6,844 hours were shaved off in reduction in staff effort due to the automation. So automation really pays off at the end of the day, and there is a significant return on investment for doing that. When you start looking at some of the key research findings from the same study, 89% of testing teams said that they're dealing with budget pressures. In other words, they're trying to do more with less. 80% of quality assurance professionals agreed that the #1 goal is to improve testing quality. 90% of the survey participants cite functional and security testing as the top priority. So 90% of the people said that functional testing, OQ/PQ testing, and security testing were top priorities, including cybersecurity testing. And then when you look at 80% of participants said that they're finding it challenging to recruit specialized skills, those professionals who are familiar with automated testing tools. And then 65% rate internal testing tools as a key strategy. So this last number was really important to me because it said that according to the research, people are waking up to the fact that automation is no longer a luxury, but it's a necessity. And that's a plurality of participant findings. When you look at the impact of defects throughout the commercial off-the-shelf deployment lifecycle, here's another fact that this study revealed. A defect costs about $1 when it's in the requirements or design phase to fix. It costs $10 to fix it in the testing phase. And then after the system goes live, it's as much as $100 to fix a single defect. So the longer you go across this continuum, the more costly defects are to fix. So what's the takeaway from this? The takeaway is that the earlier you fix the defects, the less costly it's going to be. This also makes the case for automation because during the beginning of the process or the earlier life cycle stages, I can use my automated testing, and because testing is automated, I can repeatedly test to make sure that my software quality is sound. And then, of course, you know, there are tremendous benefits of automation. You know, operational efficiencies, validation productivity, decreased risk of application failure. I had a company in Europe that did a validated system, and after they went live, they found 340 defects. I would say that that system probably wasn't in a validated state if we're finding that many defects. The other one, improved compliance review. Through automated testing, a lot of organizations are actually doing a lot of their compliance review online, and there are many other benefits of automation. Now, let's look at an automated testing solution. So you might say, well, geez, Val, that sounds great, but is there anything out there that does this? And I'm going to show you one system that does a lot of what we're doing or what we talked about, #1. But #2, this is kind of the de facto way that we are actually validating Dynamics 365. So before I go into that, let's talk about what the FDA said in the General Principles of Software Validation, which is kind of known as the Bible of software validation in the United States. They said a good test case has a high probability of exposing an error. Now, when I talk to validation engineers, a lot of times they're writing the test script to actually pass. What we should be doing is writing a test case that has a high probability of exposing an error. And that's really what we want to do. So there's an art and a science to writing test case. They say that the usual test case is really insufficient for validation. So be careful about how you write your validation test. But more importantly, Automation allows you to focus on writing good test cases instead of getting through the process of generating test cases, which is what a lot of people do. Now, most of you know that Microsoft Dynamics 365 comes with something called Task Recorder. And we used to use Task Recorder a while during validation. But there's a little problem with Task Recorder in that Task Recorder was not designed really for IV&V. Task Recorder, don't get me wrong, it's an excellent tool. And Task Recorder is meant for exactly what the name implies, recording a task. However, when you have to do things like trace, a test script with a requirement or publish your test cases in predefined formats and things like that, and to manage your test scripts under change control, that's where Task Recorder falls down. So let me zoom in on this and show you what I'm talking about. If you read the text here from Task Recorder, it says, updating a recording allows you to quickly fix or change an existing recorder after the underlying forms have changed. Okay, when you look at that, from a validation perspective, that sounds great from an implementation perspective, but from a validation perspective, I want that test case to undergo a change request before I just kind of change it on the fly. So if you think about Task Recorder and what it was used for, that's really what it was used for, and not necessarily for validation testing. Now, when we look at validation testing maturity, think about where you are on this continuum. The initial stages, and this is the testing maturity model that we use for validation, whereas you go from level 1 to level 5. Level 1 is initial validation, where processes are chaotic and undefined. And as you go to level 5, you're getting to test process optimization, quality control, and defect prevention. Level 5 implies automation of the process to achieve level 5. And I would submit to you, you probably can't reach level 5 effectively unless you automate your processes down the line. Now, we practice something called lean validation, which is designed to eliminate waste, minimize risk, drive quality, and ensure compliance, and eliminate redundant or what we call wasteful processes. This is, lean validation is based on the principles of lean manufacturing. So that's kind of what we practice there. So we have an application that we use in our practice called Validation Master. And Validation Master really is an enterprise validation management and quality system. All of the pain points that we talked about, automated traceability, fully automated testing, auto defect tracking, graphical workflows, regulatory content management, CAPA, non-conformance, validation reporting. It's all here in one cohesive solution. So instead of using all of those point applications that we were talking about, Validation Master brings together everything under one house. It's delivered, hosted, or on-premise. It has an integrated SharePoint-based Validation Master portal, fully automated validation testing where I can set a timer and I could say at 12 noon, execute these tests, or manual testing, and then flexible reporting to export all of your documents in your SOP-defined format. So let's take a look at a couple of things that Validation Master does. Validation Master runs on any mobile device, any Windows, Apple, or Android mobile device. And this is really key because no longer am I tied to my desktop. It delivers actionable intelligence. I can look at my test execution status, requirements coverage, open incidents, top risk, test release summary, and much more. When I look at the system, Validation Master includes dashboards that provide a lot of this functionality. It also won an award this year from CIO Review magazine as one of the top validation solutions. So let's talk about requirements management. Not only do I want to manage requirements online, but I want to see the risk associated with requirements. I want to see if the requirement has a test case associated with it. And if that test case has been executed, I want to be able to see whether or not that test case passed or failed. If you look at the red areas, those are the test cases that have failed. The green areas are those that have passed. The color-coded blue and gold are the risk associated with requirements. So from my requirements dashboard, if you will, I can see the requirements, and you'll also see that I've actually traced it to a specific release. So as I'm maintaining the validated state, I can pull up and look at the release associated with that requirement and pull up all of the information for a particular release. With Test Master, this is really kind of the heart of Validation Master. It allows you to automatically capture a script. So just like Task Recorder does, this actually records the task, but it does something that Task Recorder doesn't do. It allows you to execute that script online and actually generate the pass-fail status and report them in a way that validation engineers need to see it. And this is very important. You can publish automatically. So when I click a button and I say publish this script, it pushes it to my SharePoint portal, starts a document workflow using DocuSign, and sends that off for routing, review, and approval. That's something that can't be done with Test Master. That's done here with Validation Master. And then if I hit an issue during the test script development, I can actually record the incident, and the incident stays tracked with my system. In my regulatory Validation Master portal, I have graphical workflows that are powered by Mentex. So any corrective actions, any compliance documents, which means all of my validation documentation, any non-conformances or deviations, they all go through a graphical workflow. We use DocuSign as the electronic signatures in the system, which is fully compliant with 21 CFR Part 11. It even has a risk management feature in it that allows me to manage all of my risk according to GAMP5 standards. So I can do a complete risk assessment, and I can keep track of my risk assessment. You'll see that I can create the periods over time that I analyze risk, showing the regulators that I'm actually doing my due diligence. A lot of times when people do a risk assessment, they do a risk assessment once and forget about it. This system allows you to track and manage risk over time. And then it even has the corrective and preventive actions feature in it. So if I run into any non-conformances, for example, non-conformances can be tied to my corrective actions, and I have a complete closed loop system. I can also generate standard graphical reports, and this is really, really super important. Your standard operating procedures codify the way your reports need to look. And so when you're looking at your reports, you want to make sure that they're in your standard reports. Our report generator not only allows you to export reports in your own format, we give you graphical reports as well. So you can see the incident status, your testing status, and much more. There's hundreds of reports that are available here. But here's one of the bottom lines, and this is one of the things that we have challenges doing in Task Recorder. In validation, we have to capture the expected result and the actual result. We also have to capture whether the test script passed or failed and the time and initial and date stamp. Wouldn't it be nice if when you executed the test script, the system publishes or populates the actual result, and I get a report like this? This is exactly what Validation Master does, is it provides expected results and actual results when you execute test scripts online. And then Cloud Master 365 really brings all of this together for Dynamics 365. So with CloudMaster 365, you get the validation master system, this whole robust enterprise validation management system with all of the integrated tools in it. We then preload a full set of user requirements for Dynamics 365 for operations. We also fully load about 130 IQ, OQ, PQ test scripts for Dynamics 365, representing the out-of-the-box functionality. All of this is the new way we do validation toolkits. So when you get this system, you get a system that allows you to manage over time the validation, not only of Dynamics 365, but any other system. You get the preloaded user requirements and preloaded IQ. So once your Dynamics 365 for operations is provisioned, you can immediately start going through and approving the test scripts and executing them, accelerating validation. Some of my clients have seen a 60% reduction in the validation effort because this is ready to go. All of your validation master plan, the risk assessment is already completed, the user requirement specification is already done, the configuration spec is already done, all of the documents are done. You just need to execute these and then manage this over time. That's what CloudMaster does. It's really all about risk. When we talk about automation of validation, it's really all about risk and compliance at the end of the day. It supports the notion of continuous testing. It brings actionable intelligence for validation, providing project status on demand, and you can look at this project status even on a mobile device. And then ensures data integrity by providing a single source of truth for all of your validation. And what I mean by a single source of truth is that there is one place where all of your validation assets are stored. So when you look at validation, it's really time to get your house in order. Validation Master gives you all of the functionality that we talked about, automated test script execution, even source code management. It integrates seamlessly with Visual Studio Team Services. So if you don't want to use the built-in source code management tool, you can integrate with third-party applications for electronic review and approval and global IV&V execution. Validation Master works the way validation engineers work. It was designed by validation engineers for validation engineers. So it brings together IV&V test automation, automating the validation processes for lean validation, a reusable test script library, and automated test script development and execution, saving time and money. That's what this whole solution brings together at the end of the day. So what are my 7 habits of highly effective automation or automated validation testing? It's time to sharpen the saw when we look at this. The 3 key objectives are to save time and money, improve efficiencies over time, and decrease IV&V document times. These are the things that would help you sharpen the saw. You want to make sure that you conduct the compliance assessment. You also want to make sure that you automate the process end to end. It's not good enough just to automate one aspect of this. So let's say you automate your 21 CFR Part 11 electronic signatures, but you're still doing test scripts manually. It's good to automate the process end to end the way I just showed you. Always build a reusable test script library. This is one of the most time-consuming things is during regression testing, having to redevelop these tests over and over. You want to automate traceability. In a cloud environment, you want to be able to do and support continuous testing. And if you don't do anything else, please adopt e-signature processes for validation documents. Make it easy for people to sign your documentation. And the last but not least, Ensure that all of your resources are trained. Training is essential to the adoption of an automated validation process. Now, what do I think are some of the final thoughts that I want to leave you with? The keys to your success are this. You're going to have to develop a set of standard operating procedures that provide governance for your automated processes. Most of your SOPs today probably just consist of ways that you manage paper. You will have to develop a new set of SOPs for automated processes. So I usually recommend people develop an SOP for cybersecurity, people develop an SOP for automated document control, people develop an SOP for cloud management. You also want to think through a comprehensive strategy for automation. And when you select a tool like the Validation Master tool, for example, you want to make sure that that tool is comprehensive enough, that it's not going to require you to, manually integrate a bunch of point solutions. That's why it's important to have a single tool that does all of this. You also want to gain commitment from your executive management team with respect to automation. Make them understand the benefit to their organization. If they want you to develop all of these systems and validate all of these systems, it's going to be essential that you have automated processes. And then train. Learn how to use the tool, learn how to optimize the tool for your organization and make it your own. One of the things I didn't mention about Validation Master is you can configure it without being a programmer. You want to train on this system. Learn to catch defects early. Remember, a good test script is one that reveals an error. You want to catch defects early, and then you want to address cybersecurity. Cybersecurity doesn't affect companies like Equifax, for example, but it is actually an impact on validated systems. Listen to my last webinar on addressing cybersecurity and validation. And then understand the new regulatory requirements for cybersecurity and data integrity as you look to automate your validation process. So with that, I'm going to open it up, Steve, to questions and answers. See?
Sounds good. Yeah, Valarie, we got about 5 minutes, so we do have some questions. I'll roll through them here. We'll get in a couple, but again, if you did submit a question, whether we answer it online here or not, we will get back to you with an answer. So Valarie, the first question is, we've got a number of cloud-based and on-premise systems. Is CloudMaster 365 only for Microsoft Dynamics 365?
You use Validation Master for any system. Certainly it does support Dynamics 365, but it is application neutral. So whether we're talking about process validation, equipment validation, or any desktop application, or any enterprise application, CloudMaster 365 can be used for anything. Of multiple systems that you have to validate. This system would not be useful to you if it only dealt with one application. It has to deal with your whole validation library, if you will, of all of your systems. And that's what we mean by a single source of truth. Not only your validation system for 365, but any other system you'd like to manage and control.
Okay. Second question, can you talk again about the difference between the system you presented and Microsoft Task Recorder? Why isn't it optimal for validation?
Yes, that's a great question. A lot of people ask me that because Task Recorder over the years has significantly improved, and they've added a lot of functionality in it. But there are a couple of limitations, if you will, with Task Recorder. Number one, a lot of ERP systems are integrated with other systems. When you're using Task Recorder sees Dynamics 365, but it doesn't really see outside Task validation, the way validation engineers do? That's a really important question.
All righty. We've got a couple more, but we're just about out of time. So again, we'll get back to you folks. So just to wrap up here, as we said, the prior webcasts, 1 through 3 are available now on demand, so you can download them. Fullscope.com. Valarie's company's website is www.onshoretech.com. And again, this particular webinar has been recorded, and in a couple of days, you can pick it up out on the Fullscope website as well. So thank you very much for joining. Please contact us if there's any other information that you need. Thank you very much, Valarie.
Thank you, and everyone have a great day.